This conference will now be recorded.
Okay, this is a meeting of the Village of Pittsford Planning Board on July 27th, 2020. It is now 6:14 p.m. and we are meeting via conference call pursuant to Governor Cuomo's recent executive orders due to the coronavirus pandemic. The Village Hall is closed to the public, and we are meeting virtually via video conference. Links to this video conference call are on the Village website, and any member of the public is able to join us and participate should they so desire. With that said, I will make a motion to open this workshop session.
Second.
How do you vote?
Aye.
Aye. Let the record show that Justin Vleetstra, Justin Lightgib, Joanne Shannon, and David Marshall all are in attendance and voted in favor of opening the meeting. Okay, that said, our topic for discussion is the continuation of our workshop where we're talking about the Village of Pittsford's draft active transportation plan, and whether or not it complies with our local waterfront development standards that were adopted as part of the LWRP. So the active transportation plan is on the Village website for any members of the public that would like to view it, front and center on the webpage. All right, I think that gets our background stuff out of the way. I had to glance over at my other monitor here to figure out what to read. So I've been spoiled the last few weeks of actually getting a second monitor hooked up, and that's been very helpful. Okay, so Susan will hopefully join us soon, but it sounds like it may be a while. At least a few minutes.
Justin, V, might you give me a little bit of background on one question, which is, what is the difference between consistency with versus supports versus is in compliance? You know, as part of this LWRP, one of my challenges will be understanding that the active transportation plan doesn't necessarily go as far as what perhaps would be nice to see with regards to improving the waterfront, but it doesn't necessarily detract from what's already present. So the question that I have is, can something be consistent but not necessarily advance the cause, you know, quote unquote?
I don't know. I think that's a question for us. Looking at some of the things inside here, I mean, I think ideally, if they wanted to conflict with it a little bit or not follow what some of the recommendations in there, I think ideally they should just state it and state why. But it looks like early on in the planning phase of this, they never consulted the LWRP. I don't think anyone read it, so I don't think any of them looked into its recommendations. So I think that's troubling, and I think at least the committee should be going through there, and where possible conflicts or causes are identified that should be advanced. If they don't think it's financially viable or there's some other good reasons, I think some statements to that effect would help along quite a bit. You know, my opinion is it is the goal of the LWRP is not to ignore it and just stay the same. I don't think that was one of the goals. So by not considering it and not explaining it, I'm finding that a concern.
So along those lines, I guess I would agree that it doesn't seem to take into consideration some of the recommendations in the LWRP. Is my search of this document working correctly, that it actually doesn't even contain the term LWRP? Or am I searching, or is my search not working in the ATP?
Can't imagine.
I think that's completely correct. I don't think any of the members of the committee have ever read or the consultant have ever read the LWRP.
Yeah, I can't find any references to it right now, which is surprising. I hadn't searched for that before.
There is the one section that they talk about a canal improvement plan where they're going to put, I think, possibly an amphitheater along the canal. That was that thing that was also cited in the comprehensive plan that was nixed. I remember Joanne let's track that down and some of those standards. Where was this? There's a section in here that talks about some of the community planning things. I seem to recall this page 20 something. It was in the teens. It's fairly early in the document.
And that's where we suggested that they needed to add the LWRP, right?
Yeah, page 13 of the document.
Yeah.
Talks about the Village of Pittsford zoning code, and they should add a citation to the LWRP. And I would have to scan their addendum, but they may well have did that in the addendum.
Page 7 too, I think. That's the first thing on their addendum is page 7 to update the Town of Pittsford comprehensive plan and the village comprehensive plan. And on page 11 to add the LWRP.
Oh, so that's the addendum. Okay.
Yeah, it's in the addendum.
Okay. That's encouraging that they have the term there at least.
Yeah.
They do a very thorough job on page 13 of the ATP in citing sections of our code that talk about pedestrian travelways. And they mentioned chapter 130, 168, 176, and 189. 189 was recently repealed. So I just noticed that we might want to have that reference scratched.
The addendum rewrote that whole section.
Did it? Okay, great. Does that,
but, it did not reference the LWRP to the zoning code, although I guess the LWRP is not in the zoning code.
mhm.
Yeah.
They even reference a newspaper vending machine code, something like that, in the 2019 revision.
Yeah, well, the addendum has quite a bit of rewrite from pages 7 through page 13 and 14.
Okay, let me open up that as well.
Hey guys, I am in between meetings and just wanted to duck in for a couple minutes. Is there anything I can do for you? Because I'll have to leave in about 8 minutes. Sorry, I don't have a good schedule tonight.
We are just having another workshop session going over this active transportation plan. And we're basically coming up with a list of notes and so on, and we'll eventually forward those along.
Okay.
Dan, I have a question.
Sure.
Have you heard anything with regards to communication with the Department of Transportation with regards to the bridges on North Main and State?
Yeah, there was a meeting last week that Renee and Bob had with them, and I've not seen the meeting notes from that.
Okay, so they're in communication, and do you know what the objectives that we had at a village level between, Bob and Renee, and what their thoughts or comments were going to be like?
Yeah, there's a few of them. One is around the immediate problem of, and this really doesn't have anything to do with the bridge reconstruction. It's just around the speed of the traffic on State Street.
Okay.
Is the big one, and what can we do to redesign it to improve it? And there are all kinds of things we're doing, but what can we do while we're pulling this bridge apart? Is there anything we can do? that was part of it. And you know, it gets down to like sidewalk width and that kind of stuff. So let's see, they covered that. You know, we're trying to get them to change lighting, to change all kinds of stuff as part of the construction project.
Mhm.
Whether they do it or not, we don't know.
Okay.
It's that sort of stuff.
And there's probably not been any comment with regards to the active transportation plan and those bridges that you're aware of?
I don't know. Yeah,
Okay.
I'll ask Renee and Bob that.
It's all right.
Yeah, well, in our last meeting, we had a lot of discussion about those bridges, and we'd really like to see the significant improvements to the sidewalk width and other things so that bicycles and pedestrians can actually cross the bridges safely.
Yeah.
We also had some discussion about the 2011, I think it was, Complete Streets resolution. And we had some questions about how that could possibly get the state to do things that we wanted in those areas along the lines that Justin was just mentioning with sidewalks too. And I'm not sure how much the village board has discussed that with the DOT, but at some point it would be interesting to bring up those issues. And I think the Complete Streets resolution, the DOT has that posted on their website from the village. It seems they have some obligation to take that into consideration and possibly consider things like the ATP. So if that hasn't been discussed, I'd be interested in hearing what they say if we bring that up.
Okay.
Yeah.
I will ask.
Thanks.
Yep.
Effectively, the idea leverage to get what we want on the bridges.
Right. It doesn't seem like leverage to the extent that the LWRP is, but it seems like it is better than nothing.
Well, that's one of the that's one of the challenges about the LWRP is to what extent can we lean on it to affect what the outcome of those bridges are, and maybe the comments from the board would have some insight into that, but we'll give comment to that, I'm sure. Hi, Susan.
Hello. Every day is blur day. I'm so sorry. I tell everyone I have a meeting on Monday and I never register Monday. So
Every day is the same right now.
It is a little
it's all
strange.
just all blur day. Yep.
Yeah.
So sorry.
Did you have any questions for Dan? He's got to go in about 3 minutes.
No.
All right. Any questions for us, Dan?
No. Well, when do you think you'll wrap this up? I think our next meeting is third week of August, third week of August. Any chance we'll have something by then, or is this going to take you a little while?
My guess is the way we're going to go is we'll continue discussions today, and that might wrap up our initial round of discussions. Then we'll probably start typing up notes and maybe review them next week and finish any other discussions we have next week. And then we'll decide what to send on to you. So I would think we may have something for you in the next couple weeks.
Okay. Then I'll try and get it on the agenda for us to at least comment on your comments. Because I don't like when they sit in limbo and you guys send it in and then we don't address it.
Do you know, once we respond to the LWRP, like we might give them comments and then wait to hear and then vote after that, right? We wouldn't move to create the final assessment of consistency until after they give us some feedback on the first round of notes. Is that right?
Well, I believe we have a public hearing scheduled for our next regular meeting in August. I have to check the date on that.
Okay. So we would give some feedback before we'd have the public meeting, and then we'd move for the actual review.
Okay.
I think that's what I'm hearing.
And that would then ensure that we give you some feedback. So that's good.
Yeah, so our public hearing is August 17th, Dan. I don't know if you are meeting the week before that.
Okay.
So I think if we can have stuff to you guys before that, that would be useful so you can look it over.
Okay. That'd be great. I will add it to the agenda as a placeholder, whether we end up getting, feedback from you or not. Might as well put a placeholder in.
Okay.
Thanks.
Yep. Okay. Sorry, guys. I have to run.
Bye, Dan.
See ya.
Right on.
Okay. Hello, everybody.
Again,
Okay. Let the record show, by the way, Susan has joined the meeting. And she joined at about, 6:25, I believe.
Mhm.
And Susan, you haven't missed much. We just had some background discussions and waiting for everybody to join. It usually a bit of a delay getting started with each of these meetings. So
So I did catch David's comments about, opportunities for us to try to influence DOT in regard to the bridges. And Joanne shared with me her great success many years ago with a petition. It's, I can't imagine that anyone wouldn't want to sign it. And I think, that's real. That's, from the larger community. It's timely. So I think that is something we could think about, kind of including in our, document arsenal, just to have more on the record, how deep the public support would be, for addressing the issues, about the two bridges. Joanne,
Okay.
you should tell what you did.
Well, it was when they redesigned the Four Corners and they were not going to put any cross, don't walk, walking signs at all. And so I went to the village hall and asked Jim Habecker, what do we do? I said, you got to make them put them in. And he said, can't do it. The only way to do it is for you to petition DOT. So I did. I got lots of signatures and they did put in they did it. So it was a successful suggestion, but I don't know if that was, 25 years ago, maybe more. Back when I was young and energetic.
Okay, maybe that's a question for Renee, and she's involved in lots of these traffic plans. She probably has some insight on how to motivate them to, make changes the community desires. Susan, we also had a question from Dave Marshall earlier, and he was kind of wondering as to what to do if, and Dave, maybe you want to repeat it, but I know Susan's looked at, done a lot with these LWRP reviews in the past.
sure.
And his question was basically whether it's consistent with, whether it conforms to, whether it just fails to detract from the LWRP, kind of what level of compliance are we seeking?
This is binary. It is consistent, is not consistent. And so you go down the list of items and either yes or no. It's not about recommendations. It is about is or is not consistent.
Just that straightforward. So
Yep.
When we go to the LWRP that we have on file, we just go point to point and we look at what is the objective. Is it consistent with that objective or is it not?
Mm.
Is that right?
Right. That's correct. And it's not, I do like the LWRP document a lot, but it is very repetitive, as you've probably discovered. And the list of points to consider are of very unequal weight. So, as much as I like it, there are some problems with it, but it is yes or no. And you back it up, the findings then become, that section of the LWRP that you are citing that supports or refutes what the proposed action is.
So in many respects, then our conversation tonight can simply start in number 1 and then go 1.1 and then 1.2 and just say, is it consistent or not? And if not, we want to provide adequate feedback such that the village board or the town board, if they wanted to make it consistent, they could enter in some sort of commentary to update or amend the active transportation plan such that we might say it is consistent when we go to review it.
Yeah, we're going to make some recommendations. I mean, this is a little bit different. It's document to document comparisons, I think, are, kind of a funny class in and of themselves. But, would be so helpful to the trustees if we could suggest, some very doable remedies,
Right.
that wouldn't require another charrette or, something big and complicated.
Yeah, right. You want to get to the point of anything that comes back as inconsistent, what remedy could there be such that it is consistent? And,
Right.
and offer some suggestions. While that isn't necessarily our primary objective, the LWRP is really just to say yes or no, and why. But the suggestion part is more a courtesy as a result of our collective brain power.
Oh,
where'd you go? We lost Susan.
You're breaking up, Susan.
so Dave, did everyone else miss?
Yeah.
Oh. I'm done.
No.
I missed all of you. All your comments, Susan.
So.
Let me go somewhere else in the house. Do you think that'll help?
It may.
May.
It
Go
might.
closer to your router.
Okay. Hold on.
So Justin, while she's
Little
walking,
tour of 85.
yeah, while she's walking. So my understanding is generally accurate, right?
Well, I was just looking at one section of the LWRP or the coastal assessment form, and it says if any question is answered yes, then it may affect the achievement of the LWRP policy standards. Thus, the action should be analyzed in more detail, and if necessary, modified prior to making a determination that an action is consistent to the maximum extent practicable. But so if you say yes, it doesn't necessarily fail it. It says it might require more analysis.
Can you send that link real quick on the?
Yeah, that was in the email along with the referral. It was from. Oh, if you look for CAF, who did that come from?
It's so much better. Thank you.
Linda. It came from Linda on July 17th. Yeah. Resolution in CAF for ATP.
All right, thank you.
And it's going to be on the instructions, which is like the 3rd page or something.
All right.
Number 3. So it sounds like to me, the way that I read is that, any yes could fail the whole thing in terms of consistency, but it doesn't necessarily have to.
I'm not sure if the language on that form is binding. The document we got to review is that 180-page document that was the adopted one. And as Susan said, I think we just go through each of the recommendations in the relevant sections and we see what we have to say. We document our concerns and forward them on to the trustees as a starting point. And if they explain, and as mentioned before, if they explain things away and say, no, we can't do this and this is why, then we have to figure out whether that makes sense or not.
Right. And then the only other thought is the LWRP is a 15-year-old document. The ATP is maybe 3 to 4. To what extent can we at all make some inference due to time that goals and objectives of the village are uniquely different? Not that they are. We shouldn't at all, right? This is just versus the 2005 document. Here's where we are. If there's inconsistencies, they can deal with them.
Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
That's what I thought. I just wanted to be sure.
Right. I mean,
And go ahead.
oh, sorry. So the LWRP is on file in Albany. So this isn't a document that is easy to amend or alter. It would, take a whole big review and update.
Yep.
Yeah.
And just Dave, just so you know, this document has serious weight to it. The provisions it's adopted under, this is basically federal law. This isn't even village law. This is, and not even a state law. This is federal law, the whole waterfront stuff. So it is binding on all kinds of agencies. So if there's conflicts with it, the basic rule is do what the LWRP says.
Okay.
Unless it clearly doesn't make sense, I think. But
Okay.
that'll be for us to decide.
Okay, great. I'm ready to start wherever you want to.
Okay, so Susan identified some of the key sections in our last meeting. I get my notes on that. So section 3, there's pages like 3 to 6, and then I think there's page 27, and then there's section 5. There's pages like 9 to 14, and there's maybe a few more. We can start with those.
Yep. If I may, the LWRP itself starts with policy 1 and goes through policy 9. Are you suggesting we go through it differently than just policy by policy?
We could go through it policy by policy. That would make sense. Here, I'll tell you what. I can just share my screen and we'll have the document open, and we can just go over it one section at a time. In the past, what we've done is gone through this and mark them as not applicable or applicable. And that was our first pass over it. I think now that I mentioned it, I think Dave, you had asked if we could forward around my draft resolution, and I think I failed to forward that around.
That's all right. I've got the LWRP in front. Basically, we just have to go policy to policy, and that's fine.
Let me see if I can share my screen here. Here we go.
Yep. All right, so I'm looking at the same thing. Yeah.
So here we are. This is policy 1. And as Susan alluded to, these things don't have equal weight. Policy 1 is a giant, all-consuming policy that covers all kinds of things. So first of all, policy 1 here is we're supposed to foster a pattern of development in the town and village of Pittsford that enhances community character, preserves open space, makes efficient use of infrastructure, makes beneficial use of a waterfront location, and minimizes adverse effects of development. My suggestion is let's first quickly go through these policies and we can say what's applicable and what's not applicable, and then we can go into them in more detail. Does that seem reasonable to everybody?
Yes.
Sure.
Okay, so this whole phrase here makes efficient use of infrastructure and things making beneficial use of a waterfront location. There's a lot of stuff in there. I'm just going to say now, I think this whole policy is something applicable that we should look at in more detail.
I agree.
Okay, so let's just move on. We'll just quickly go through these. And I'm just kind of browsing through this if this is giving you headaches. You know, we can look at some of the sub policies on inside number 1. What was the first sub policy? Preserve community character.
Did you want to go policy like the decimals and say yes or no to those two?
We could. I just think it makes sense to go through policy 1 in general in more detail.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, let's just move to policy 2 then. I'm okay saying we got to do policy 1 and move on.
Okay. So policy 2 is preserve historic resources in the coastal area. I don't really see the plan as impacting historic resources. Is there any other opinions on that?
I don't think so. There's no roads that are getting widened in a way that would adversely impact historic properties, are there?
I don't think it would impact, you know, visibility of properties. I'm not willing to say we have a historic sidewalk anywhere, yeah. and so on. I can't think of anything that this would impact.
Yeah, I agree.
Likewise, I don't think it's going to be of any archaeological concern. If someone makes a sidewalk a foot wider or someone makes a street a couple feet wider to support a bicycle lane, I don't think we have any archaeological resources of concern that are within a couple feet of sidewalks or roads.
Yeah.
Does anyone know when Main Street became a state road?
No idea. I suppose if we had any historic concerns, we could ask the HPB to weigh in on it. But like I said, I'm not particularly concerned about sidewalks and streets and minor adjustments to them. Oops.
It is interesting on page, well, this is, you don't have to refer to it, but there's a section in the active transportation plan that referred to the old comprehensive plan that had referenced, where is it? Complete a historically appropriate detailed streetscape plan for Main Street, where the four corners is the main focus. Now, I think in the adjustments afterwards, in the amendment, they removed that line because that's no longer in the comprehensive plan, I don't believe. But it was interesting that they used the word historically appropriate streetscape plan for Main Street, which is to suggest that we no longer have that goal, which I think is true. It wasn't in the new comp plan. And so then the question is there any, we'll probably never go back to bricks on the streets, especially on the state drags. But to the extent that if ever we were to do a historically appropriate streetscape plan, would that detract from bikeability? Probably would. And I don't think, it made the final cut. So that's where that amendment might matter.
Yeah, well, I think one of the things in here, and this is the next one, enhanced visual quality. There's various things in here where it talks about you want appropriate street trees and landscaping and crosswalks and all that fun stuff. And I think we have that in general. I can't think of any of these improvements in the village, at least, that are going to take away from on-street plantings and visual qualities and so on. It's mostly about restriping pavement and maybe changing the width of pavement a little bit in some spots.
Yes. So what we don't address, and I think we infer, is that we would not ever move towards putting in pavers on our roads, right? I just don't think that's even possible enough to matter, because that could be traffic.
Going back to cobblestone streets?
Yeah, go back to cobblestone, right? You could seriously slow down traffic, but you would also, it'd be a detriment to bikeability a little bit.
Try getting you to agree to that.
Yeah, I don't think it's ever going to go there. So what's interesting is the active transportation plan doesn't even really reference it, which is basically, and that's fine. I just wanted to make sure that everybody knows that.
That would be a very effective traffic calming plan. The mayor said there are in fact bricks under the asphalt, but the problem with going to that on a steep road that's highly trafficked is it would make an incredible amount of noise and no one living along the streets to be able to sleep at night.
Yeah, well, if it's just downtown Four Corners or areas where you have low density living, but effectively the active transportation plan doesn't use that as a mechanism by which to control speed, and in large part the absence of it suggests that it would not be a goal or objective, and therefore that's fine. I just wanted to point that out as a comment.
Yeah, I guess with the visual quality and protecting the scenic resources, there is the suggestion for the what was the term, an RFB, the flashing beacon, which is just over the by North Main there. And I don't know how much leeway the LWRP allows us in order to say, well, you know, based on the safety needs, we aren't going to consider that as overly detrimental to the view shed in that area.
Yeah, I would agree with that crosswalk treatments. Now, one thing that would annoy me is, you know, those squawking crosswalk signs that announce the names of the streets and they go beep, 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 beep. Those drive me insane. That would kind of detract from observing scenic resources, is to hear a constant squawking out of a low quality speaker.
Out of any speaker.
I'm sure they exist for the hearing impaired, or the visually impaired rather, so they can hear where a crosswalk is. I think the visually impaired unfortunately trying to travel our streets are not going to be long in this world.
Those are even used in Manhattan, though. Even last time, a few months ago, I was in Manhattan, and you've got similar devices across busy streets.
Yeah, well, heaven help them if the visually impaired can navigate Manhattan without getting hit by cars. I don't know. That's got to be really tough.
All right. So we're on number 2 then, right?
So we're on policy 2. I think the initial comment was we don't really see it as impacting historic resources or archaeological resources very much. Is there any disagreement with that? Do we need to look at it in more detail? Do we need to refer it to the preservation board for comment?
My comments were actually more related to 3, not at all on 2.
I'm good on 2. Yeah,
Yeah, I'm good on 2.
I'm good
Okay,
on 2.
so we're all good saying 2 is not a concern right now.
Right.
All right. And then policy 3 is what I had open on the screen, and enhancing visual quality and protecting outstanding scenic resources. I don't know what anyone's thoughts are. Landscaping is a concern, but I didn't really see anything in here that's really adversely affecting landscaping. And in the village, at least, a lot of the street trees are already there. I think when the LWRP was established, I think there's been vast improvements. So the walking path along the Shane Place area has been improved, and street trees were added there. Lots of street trees are continually added around the village. So any other thoughts on this? Is there anything to look at in more detail here?
no,
There's no lighting issues, right? There's no new lighting.
This is interesting for the bridge. The trustees were talking about lighting on the bridge. So if their plans involve intrusive artificial lighting, then that's a concern.
Yeah. So in the ATP, there's a lot of references to lighting.
Right.
One of them, in fact, on page 44 in the addendum is there is no lighting under the State Street Bridge to illuminate the trail and for safety. Yeah, that's underneath, but still, I mean, let's see. Ornamental streetlights. We talk a little bit about lighting improvements, appropriate signage and lighting.
Okay, well, how about we just flag this as something to consider in the future as to is there any mention of lighting that is of potential concern?
sounds good.
Yeah. I don't see any comments right away that would suggest that excess lighting in the active transportation plan would deter from the coastal area quality. So.
So the note for now is this policy 3.1, this item 2A is this going to cause for the intrusive artificial light sources? Okay. Next one, policy 4. Minimize loss of life, structures, and natural resources from flooding and erosion. And I don't see this as affecting any of this.
No, I think this is a NA.
Not applicable. All right. We're in agreement with that?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
Preserve or restore natural protective features. Yeah. Protect and improve water resources. Again, I don't see this as having any real impact here. We're not proposing any significant construction other than a slight widening of sidewalks or roads here and there.
Although, back to a comment that I've made before, the very first sentence of policy 5 that states the goal of the LWRP and to, enhance the canal as an amenity. And I think the ATP falls a little short on that, but
That's a good point.
Can I just comment on the to go back to the lighting issue a moment ago? I was just also browsing through chapter 121 of our village code, and it does say that if we find that even if a particular thing is not consistent with one of the categories in the LWRP, if it let's see, what's the exact wording? If the action will result in an overriding village, regional, or statewide public benefit, for example, if we determine that lights were of public benefit in the village, then we could say that that outweighs the detraction from the visual quality in that area, it seems, based on the code.
Yeah, I think if we identify concerns and we get some kind of written response as to why they're not applicable, then I think we're free to debate and see if that makes sense. So, okay. So, Susan, what do you think we should be doing? Should we just consider this first sentence here?
well, that's something we're going to have to make a decision about. It looks like the ATP has a fairly narrow street side focus, without a lot of destinations and pathways and walkways leading to the canal. But that's what they did. So I think, I'm going to have to ask myself, you'll ask yourselves, is this a big enough, is this, kind of more of a philosophical, change, or is this something that really, the lack of the attention to the canal, is that just something that wasn't, part of their mission? And if that's the case, then I think we can certainly express a concern, but I don't know that that would warrant, the LWRP, inconsistent finding. So anyway, it's a big question, but I think the ATP was just, had a different mission.
Yeah, Susan, do you think that it would address that concern that you mentioned, which I also think is a legitimate one, if we were to recommend a change, for example, something along the lines that the ATP is meant to be complementary to the LWRP, which focuses more on access to canal side amenities?
Yeah, and we could suggest some, maybe some easy additions to it. Maybe there's going to be a public hearing, some pathfinding, a kiosk, the canal is here, even something, on Main Street or something on the bridges that says, that remarks on the Erie Canal and how important it was to, nation building. Yeah, I think complementary is right, and maybe we can make a suggestion or two to, nod, to this, national landmark that everyone misses. It's like New Yorkers, who have never been to the Statue of Liberty, or, maybe it's just too big and too there. But I love the canal. I love the history of it. So, and it's we have, yep.
So I'm just going back here. It says to protect and improve water resources. Something I was thinking is something that came up during the comprehensive plan, where our discussion was as soon as you expand pavement and you increase runoff into our stormwater system, what are the impacts of that? And all of the village's stormwater goes into the canal. So I think a valid question is any of this is anything in this plan going to be increasing impervious surfaces and increasing runoff into the canal? And what efforts are being made are being considered to treat this runoff to reduce the amount of pollution going into the canal? That might not be a transportation plan correction, but that may be something that needs to be thought of.
Yeah, I agree.
Okay, so I guess that's the question is, since the goal is to improve it, what's the plan to improve it with runoff, particularly if they're going to be expanding runoff even by a small amount?
Yep.
Okay, so this one, minimize non-point pollution of canal waters.
Oh, you have to eat without me. Thank
Yeah,
you.
so it talks about some of this, avoid activities which would increase off-site stormwater runoff, control and manage stormwater runoff to address pollutants, establish vegetation to help filter that. Some of that things would make sense. Okay, so I think this is a concern. We'll just file this away and we'll move on.
Is there any,
It probably makes sense to ask the trustees in the town what their plan is for that.
is there anybody that we could request an opinion of that is within the town or within the village that we could just simply say, could you comment on your understanding as to how this may affect water runoff and pollution?
We could involve the village engineer. We could involve Scott Harder. I guess you haven't talked to him yet, have you, Dave?
No, I don't think so.
He's a resource we can pull in from time to time. We usually don't like pulling in people that cost taxpayer money. So most of the time we waste enormous amounts of our own time instead of asking someone for an hour of help. But he is a resource.
Is there a town engineer that, would a town engineer cost us money?
The town engineer might not cost us money.
Could we ask them if they think a referral to somebody other than themselves would be necessary to determine the adverse impact of the ATP on water resources?
I guess we'll flag this as a question, so I'll add that to my notes here, is should we refer this?
To be a little more specific on that one, are we specifically talking about expansion of the sidewalk network as contributing to impervious surface?
Yeah, well, I guess they did plan to expand the sidewalk network. We could ask Scott Harder at some point, hey, do sidewalks often contribute significantly to stormwater issues? And if he says no, then fine. But I think they specifically, the trustees specifically asked like a meeting or two ago, they're talking about expanding the sidewalks over by Durham Way along State Street at the entrance of the village. They wanted to make sure the sidewalks went to the village line, and they talked about forwarding that to Scott Harder for review of plans.
Maybe this could be a little add-on to that referral.
Yeah, it seems like, just in a quick Google, it seems like they do have porous concrete sidewalks. So we've talked about that in the context of parking lots before. So maybe we can ask if that's a possibility.
Oh yeah, that's an outstanding point. Is a thing to add to this is construction of new sidewalks via pervious pavement would be a nice thing to do.
Absolutely. Yeah, great point.
In addition to pervious pavement, helping with drainage. Pervious pavement also helps with safety because water goes through it instead of, so you don't get puddles on the surface that turn to ice in the winter. So supposedly it gets much less ice buildup in the winter, and you don't need to salt it.
But for me, not being an engineer, having somebody at least look at it and say, you don't need to worry about it, who we have confidence with, would be nice to add to our why we disregarded it as a concern.
All right, I think it would make sense to see if we can have a chat with Scott Harder for at least a little while. If we talk to him for half an hour or an hour, or we'll pull up our questions. That won't be a very big deal.
Is he the town engineer?
He's the village engineer.
Village engineer, okay. Question for you on number 5, and Susan, this speaks to your question. So the title of 5, being protect and improve water resources, gives the idea to me that we want to improve access, we want to improve transportation around it, we want to improve the enjoyability of it. It seems very all-encompassing. But then you get into the actual policies, 5.1 through 5.4, I think it is, and they're all mostly environmental. They're not, or discharge related. They're not access related. They're not transportation related. And so my question is, are we inferring from the title something different than what that policy is actually asking us to do?
That's great. I think our interpretation is actually spelled out very clearly in policy 1, maybe.
Yep.
So, that's, some of the joys of the LWRP, titles and, and the, actual, what they're getting at, may not always be consistent, but our interpretation is very clearly spelled out in policy 1.
Correct. And,
Yeah.
and I think it's nice. I think if we tackle number 5 as more of an engineering dilemma, and we focus more on number 1, what I hate to do is provide feedback on policy 5 in a way that's completely off base to what they interpret policy 5 to be. And I think everything that we might think of that could fall in policy 5 could easily be placed in 1.
Yep, I agree.
So.
Yeah, well, one of the key questions is, will impervious surfaces be expanded? And it sounds like yes, as part of this, they want to build new sidewalks and so on. So how will that impact it? And I think if we forward that off to the trustees and the town, they can sit there and chew on that for a little while.
All right.
Okay, so 5 is something I'll just mark it as a maybe of concern, and we'll consider it in the future. So ask questions, consider it in the future.
Okay.
I'm typing up some notes as I'm going here, so I hope my keyboard is not too loud for you guys. So up to policy 6, protect and restore ecological resources.
I don't see it applicable.
Yeah, I don't see any of this work as being, no work is proposed at all, I think, on any actual waterways.
Yeah.
I think you could say that if you wanted to make more of a case for supporting the ATP especially, you could say that more pedestrian, more human-powered transportation is a net benefit to the ecology of the area.
Yeah.
Right.
Okay, so I like that sentence. The more pedestrian transportation is beneficial for the environment. So that sounds like a nice observation. So let me just browse through this. Yeah, none of this looks that applicable. Dumping fill in the wetlands. I think we already approved that with the canal trail.
Mhm.
That one trail for the, what were they going to use? They're going to use asphalt millings and anyway, but they said that was fine. Air quality in the waterfront area. I think that statement you made before, Justin, is equally applicable. More pedestrian transportation is beneficial to the environment.
Yep.
So we're in agreement that air pollution is not a concern with this plan?
Yes.
Yep.
Uh-huh.
Minimize environmental degradation of the coastal area from solid waste and hazardous substances.
Not applicable.
Yeah.
Yeah. NA.
All right, I'm in agreement. Okay, this was an obvious one. Policy 9, provide for public access to and recreational use of the canal waters, public lands, and public resources of the waterfront area. We've already talked about this as being a significant concern.
Yeah. My only add-on, and this maybe refers a little bit, Susan, to your comments prefacing number 5, which is, if not the ATP, when? Right? Policy 9 basically sets you up for either some substantial code change based on the comp plan, which I don't necessarily see, or if there's any document that's going to radically kind of put a vision to the future for how to integrate all of our canal space, both in the village or the town. This is it. And I don't want to necessarily get in the way of progress on many levels, but are we really going to go back and review the ATP? And if this is the document that we use to determine funding from the state or from wherever over the next 15 to 20 years, and we fail to adequately address it here, when will we?
Yeah.
I'm in agreement. That's the problem.
I think the ATP is so short on vision. It addresses some issues today, and kind of I think a very, kind of a more Band-Aid approach. Would have been nice to have something really, kind of out there.
Yeah.
Setting up the DOT for, what about the day? Maybe there is going to be a day with fewer cars, and isn't that a goal? And all the ATP does is kind of work with the state roads as givens, that this will always be the case.
Right.
But anyway.
Okay, anyway, so we're in agreement that this is a concern. And I would, to address Dave's comment, I would feel a lot better even if they amended their addition to say the waterfront LWRP plan suggests we make the following improvements, And then it states, we're not going to do them at this time, but we should consider them in the future. At least then you have a placeholder. So whenever this is amended in the future, someone goes back and looks at it.
Yeah. And Justin, your comments are a different way of saying what I was about to comment on, which is I would hate for somebody to use the ATP as a way to say, look, you never mentioned it in here that you wanted connectivity of walkways and bikeability in and around the Monroe Ave Bridge, or in and around, 75 Monroe, or any of these other things. You failed to include it, so clearly it wasn't a vision or part of your conceptual plan. So therefore, we don't need to do it, right? The idea that the absence of it in a document that might generally be the only document that you put it in, does that say anything? And that's where, to Justin, your point, if you could make amendments that suggest this document, the ATP, is focused on improvements of our existing roadways and infrastructure, not a visionary document for new roadways or new bike paths or new walking paths. And we would suggest that you refer to the LWRP as your primary source of goals and objectives relative to the waterways. Just something. I don't know. I'm afraid that the ATP could be used against you if you're not visionary enough.
Yeah, they need to give a rationalization for conflicts. I think it's pretty clear they didn't consider this. And the LWRP, so they had their own prime directive, which I believe they had just at like the first page of the document for stating the goals of what this LWRP was trying to accomplish. And the access to the canal was not in there. And what you got to rank that as one of the top priorities and the entire purpose of the document, in my opinion. And they failed to consider that.
I agree. And this is where there's a couple things, right? Going back to what are we going to give them to think about and what could they affect before they pass the thing? I think we could probably work towards, in this existing ATP, improvements within the amendments to get them to consider better accessibility to the current canal transportation plan, right? Or whether or not it's integrating the bridges, maybe incorporating some comment about the 75 or the Monroe Ave Bridge, doing something, maybe connecting some of those bike corridors or what boulevards that they were talking about. But I think they should still make comment that it isn't a visionary where would we like to go as much as it is an improvement upon what we already have.
Okay.
Yeah.
Can we, oh, go ahead, sorry.
I was just going to say, especially down in, are we on 9 now? I was looking at 9.2.
Yeah.
Where it says the Erie Canal towpath in the Pittsford area is the most heavily traveled trail section in the region and the state. And it talks about connecting the trail system to the historic village. So it seems like right there, maybe you could, just modify the statement that I was thinking of a minute ago about the ATP being complementary to the LWRP, realize that the LWRP is showing a little bit of age perhaps and could be updated at some point, but say that as a future priority, we'd like to update specifically that section of the LWRP. We recognize its significance and the ATP shouldn't be considered to supplant in terms of importance the next priorities for trail connectivity.
Yeah, glad you brought up that paragraph 9.2 there. I think you read that, it's pretty darn clear. It to be compatible with LWRP, if you're impacting this area, you shall expand some of these connections and improve connectivity.
Yeah.
Can I, quick question, does the ATP anticipate anything happening at 75 Monroe? I don't
think it was mentioned in there.
Pardon?
I don't think it was mentioned in there.
Because what a game changer that's going to be.
Yeah, there's nothing that specifically says 75 Monroe. What's that new zone called?
It's
Well-
still R5.
Still R5, yeah.
So a particular project would be evaluated for LWRP compliance, but there's also the premise that when you're making more comprehensive plans, you should consider the cumulative impact on the environment and so on. That's part of seeker. So if stuff is known to occur, does it need to be addressed? And I'm not going to mention anything in particular about 75 Monroe here. I'm just bringing up those comments.
I do feel, and this is big picture long term, that if you could connect, at least within the village in terms of what we're looking at, the east to the west side of the canal, and have a bikeable, engaging waterfront community that extends beyond Shane Place, that would be of interest, right? And where it takes you from Shane Place to the new park, to the new, heck, if they put a dog park, or, you know, the connection to the Audubon, the Auburn Trail, and then continue west, and maybe there's some long-term visionary opportunities over there, you know, just as you come out of the village towards Wegmans on Monroe. Maybe the connectivity, if anything ever happens, positive or negative, or just yes or no in 75 Monroe, what that looks like, and how would you get on bike there across to the canal path, and not just in a way like, oh, there's a way to do it, but in a way, oh, this is kind of nice to do. I mean, this is really kind of cool. And right now there's not that. I mean, unless you're on Shane Place, and I mean, heck, even going from Shane Place down to the new park, you got to go past kind of a dingy looking area there. So it'd be nice if somehow we turn that into a really more vibrant area with some sort of visionary planning. And I don't think the ATP is per se the right doc to do that, but at least you got to give some mention to the fact that it's not trying to do that.
Yeah.
Well, something we talked about in our last meeting is connecting schools to and so on to other areas. And we mentioned Nazareth College, at least in a particular thing to focus on. But that's connected up next to the Auburn Trail. And this talks about using the Auburn Trail and expanding that. So we want to make sure it's well connected to Nazareth, but also, is it actually a viable route to connect to the Pittsford Plaza area? And I don't know what that vision needs to be, but I think that's something that needs some serious planning and consideration.
Yeah.
I think we all agreed you can't really bicycle from the village very well to Pittsford Plaza, and getting over that bridge is a little perilous. So going down the Auburn Trail and along the canal is another viable way to get there. Anyway, well, we'll consider this further.
Yep. And again, I don't know if anybody wants to make just an additional comment. You can pass a consistency review even though you're not necessarily creating the benefit that you might expect. Meaning, I just want to be careful to not be too judgmental on a document that I guess I'd rather be judgmental of, right? Going back to the idea that if not in the ATP, where, but is that more of a comprehensive plan type insight in terms of what we want versus the ATP? And I guess that's where I just would prefer if the ATP could more clearly state what their goals and objectives are and what they're not trying to be. That would be helpful to me.
Mm-hmm.
Let's see, I think there's another section in here. Under 9.2. Yeah, I had the first paragraph, and this third paragraph is important. So it talks about improved access to the Lock 32 Park, improvement to the Lock 62 Trail, and the Auburn Rail Trail. So it all says is that connectivity needs to be improved.
Yeah, and this is where I agree with you. The absence of it is a little bit more compelling specifically for this type of document.
And if they just said this is something that we don't envision as being financially practical at this time, but should be reviewed in the future, I might be okay with that.
Yeah.
Well, some of the recommendations are so wishy-washy. They could be, of the ATP itself, consider or, maintain or.
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah, why not add, some things from the LWRP and, get them in there.
Yeah.
They could just say, consider it's connecting the Auburn Trail to Pittsford Plaza.
Right.
Mhm.
Right.
Right. And this is where I think broadly, if you were to sum up lines that we would like in there, you could say, consider connectivity improvements to the following areas, and just drop that in.
Yeah, right.
Okay. Anyway, let's move on from 9. We consider that we agreed that's a substantial concern.
Yeah. Yeah.
Next one is protecting water dependent uses. I saw that as not applicable.
Agree.
Yeah, I agree. I have a question though. Active transportation plan. Did they mention anything about boating?
No.
Or no?
Nope.
That's somewhere here in the LWRP that's needed. I think it's a Ford Field section. They talk about that.
All right, let's see. Village of Pittsford Code. Okay, there is this note. Should be noted that there's very limited code language intended to protect bicyclists or to ensure bicycle accommodations. The 2 notable code references, they mention a couple. This is on page 13. One restaurant, enjoyment of Erie Canal, such as boat docks, boat excursions. Nope, nothing. And that's it. Yeah, okay. Is there any value to them including some comment to boating as a way to, maybe people can park at Kings Bend Park and they put in a boat launch there?
Yeah, I think there's a few places in the LWRP it does call for that.
So a boat launch at something like Kings Bend, I don't know where there is one close to us in the village. I don't have a boat.
There used to be a boat rental right at Shane Place in front of the barns.
Yeah, there's one just a little further up where the rowing center is, a regular boat launch that's very close by. But I think it probably wouldn't fit in the ATP unless it's human powered, the kayaks or something like that.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, I guess that's what I'm referencing more. Like, where could we get 20 people to go park a car with boats on top coming in from the town, drop them in the canal and paddle into Shane Place, and then where could they get out at Shane Place to have lunch in Portage, or not Portage, but like tie up their kayaks and stuff. Right now, I don't know if I had a kayak where I could easily get it out of the water to have lunch at Shane Place.
There used to be a floating dock over behind the photography house.
Duncan Studio?
Yeah, or maybe behind what's now Lattimore Physical Therapy. There used to be a dock over there, floating dock. I don't know what happened to it.
There is a lower dock down there, isn't there?
Yep.
I haven't looked. I don't know.
Yeah, so it's on this side, right? It's on the village side of Shane Place. Is there anything on the opposite side where all the restaurants are?
I
They
don't
have
think
lots of tie-ups for big boats. I don't know if you can actually get out of a little boat there.
Yeah.
so.
I don't know. I guess if I don't know, the ATP, maybe it would be nice to have mention of something about water or human-powered water transportation, and potentially considering something like a Kings Bend Park place to put in kayaks and canoes. Maybe yeah, go ahead, Justin.
I think it's Lock 32 is the launch is right below that, right?
There is a launch there?
Yep. That'll suit power boats and anything smaller.
Okay. All right, so maybe there's enough in there already. I just don't, I guess this goes back to our how we communicate it and how we like living in the village now for 3 years, I had no idea that's where I would have to go.
Well, I remember it said that you should add a boat launch at Ford Field, which are the Little League fields at the edge of the village. You know, where they, that'd be a great spot to add it because there's lots of parking there. It's right on the waterfront. And right now, the waterfront gravel area is just used for parking lots for Little League. It's a parking lot.
I agree. I think that'd be nice.
Anyway, all right, let's move on to 10 here. I don't think we discussed as to whether anyone thought, I had thought 10 was not applicable, but I don't know. I thought this discussion over human powered water transportation is more applicable to 9, which is access to the canal.
Yeah, right. Provide visual.
Are you looking at policy 10.2?
I'm looking at policy 10.
Look at
Oh,
policy.
it talks about the boat launch.
Yeah, look at 10.2.
10.2.
Section 4 of the LWRP.
Yeah, section 4 is a region specific things. I remember it talked about that in the Ford Field section.
Yeah.
So this 10.2 seems to be applicable, is what I've heard.
Yeah. They even reference ice skating in the existing boat launch area question. This is at Lock 32, I think.
Oh, okay, so I'll add that ice skating.
I don't know how long we'll be able to do that, but yeah.
It's going to be a long time before it stops snowing in Rochester.
Along the lines of the human-powered boat usage, so the lower portion of the dock there that was mentioned seems to be an adequate area to put in a kayak or something like that and tie it up. I think it was missing a couple of cleats, so boats couldn't use all portions of that. So somebody could go down there and screw a couple more cleats in, and that would make a difference. But there are also village policies that I think could be revised. A lot of people just dock their motorboats there for the entire season.
Yeah.
And if they actually had some enforcement for a time limitation or for charging a small amount as they do in Bushnell's Basin, that would probably allow them to reasonably free up certain spaces for only human-powered boats.
Great idea. Yeah. So who is in charge of,
Go ahead.
no, I was just, who is in charge of the Bushnell's Basin facilities? Town, is that like Paul Schenkel? Who is that?
No idea.
Yeah.
That's not That isn't Pittsford, is it? I think you go into the gas station that's nearby the docks there to pay for that, but
Oh, you're talking by the bridge in Bushnell's Basin?
Right.
Yeah, that would be different. That'd be Penfield or Parrington rather. So that's another town.
yeah,
It's
I
our
think
school district.
most
Yeah.
other municipalities charge for docking. I believe that Brockport may as well, or they have some kind of limitation in Bushnell's Basin. So people tend to go to Pittsford to stay for free.
Is Pittsford free?
Yeah, and nobody enforces the time limitation.
Oh,
I had heard that other places charge substantial amounts of money, and I thought Pittsford was thought to be very expensive. I was talking to someone who likes to sailboat, and he's talked about getting a houseboat going up and down the canal, and he's never thought about stopping in Pittsford. So I think I heard that they typically charge something like $10 to $20 per foot of boat as overnight rentals for docking at those places. So if you have a 25-foot boat, you'd be paying like $250 a night for docking.
No,
Or
Bushnell's Basin was not that much. I think it was only around $7 a night or something for a boat.
$7 total a night.
I think it was somewhere around there. Yeah, it wasn't more than 20 for a 20-foot boat or something like that.
And that would make sense. I don't think we want to discourage. We want to get tourists here. We don't want to make it prohibitively expensive for them to come and visit. And it doesn't cost much for them to tie up.
Talking about tourists, is there any location within the village, maybe it's Kings Bend Park, again referencing the town, but where you could have a proprietor renting kayaks or canoes? Like where could one place that? Is that something that has to naturally develop? But it wouldn't develop if we didn't create the location to put it or have a place to put these things in the water. And maybe that speaks to the Ford Field idea. Maybe it speaks to, Kings Bend or something. Maybe the new parkland.
Isn't there a dock? Isn't there a dock off Marsh Road where the dump used to be? Isn't there a low dock, like another floating dock where you can put kayaks in there?
where do you mean?
I can see it in my mind, but I don't know how to tell you to get there. It seems it's in the Marsh Road area on that side of the canal. Just past where that lock is, that's not really a lock. I don't know, what is it? It's a stop gate or something.
Yeah, I
And
know what you're talking about.
they redid, there used to be a town dump there and they made it a park.
Is that Great Embankment Park? Is that what you're?
Yes.
Uh-huh.
Oh,
Oh yes, there
There
is
is
a floating
something.
dock there. You're right.
Yes.
Yep. Aluminum or something.
Okay.
Yeah.
Uh-huh.
So boat type for canoes, you think there's one at Kings Bend Park?
That's 1 mile. So let's see, how far is that?
I think there is a way for a person to get out of a boat and go up and down, but I think there's a big set of stairs and you aren't going to be dropping a canoe in the water there because you'd have to like throw it over your shoulders and into the water or something like that. There's no ramp to get your boat down there. So if you're to unload a canoe at Kings Bend Park, you're not getting it into the canal.
No. It's about 1 1/4 to 1.5 miles. And it takes about 30 minutes to kayak a mile. No, that's a little less. Sorry. Yeah, a non-experienced kayaker. All right, so it's not awful, but it's certainly not as convenient as something within the village if we could accommodate that at Ford Field.
Yeah.
Yeah, so this policy 10.3 here talks about adding more boater services. And some of that's been added. All of the services over at Port of Pittsford Park, right across from Sheen Place, they have electrical hookups
Right.
and nice docks and water hookups. That's all new. That was after the LWRP was created, so that's a significant value added for boaters, motor boaters. But obviously, people on a canoe aren't going to use that. But they can use a tie-up and launching points close to Shane Place.
Mhm.
And like you said, let's let a person on a canoe be able to get to a restaurant.
Yeah.
Yeah, without having to break a sweat. Not that it's that bad if they do, but I'm just thinking, I know Fairport is much bigger than we are, but it is sort of nice to have a place to go rent a canoe or a kayak. I don't necessarily want a kayak all the time. I'd like to have kayaks, but I really don't want them at my house. I don't want to have to throw them on my car or drive them around anywhere. If I could go down and rent one and be down in the water for a couple days out of the year, great.
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree with you. I had a canoe and I got rid of it because I had no place to store it. Once you figure out that these things are 20 feet long and you ask, where on earth am I going to put it? That's a problem.
Yeah.
I don't have a garage that is big enough to fit it.
Even if, I'm thinking about the gentleman who we just worked with for putting in the sign over by the library and by the realty. Right behind there, if there was some location that could accommodate, boats and boat storage and a launch, that'd be neat. And do we not get it simply because it's really not a very viable business plan? Maybe. Right? In which case you kind of have to create that opportunity for people with things like Ford Field ideas. But just having it, I think, is better than not.
How about storing kayaks in the barn that's going to be built?
Oh, that's a great
Yeah.
point. Actually, Susan, you might be onto something. What if we
So
had,
maybe encourage people to have a storage area for their own boats?
what if we had a village-sponsored priority boat storage facility for canoes or kayaks?
Yeah.
That would be awesome. So village residents, first come, first serve, followed by town, and then you could have a out of town rental rate, right?
Yeah.
Where you pay a
barn-
higher fee.
The barn is town.
Barn is town. Well, the new barn they're put. Oh yeah. Well, someplace it would be great.
Yeah.
So that would actually be a pretty neat idea. So you could just, get together with a few friends and let's say, hey, let's buy a boat. Well, we can store it here for next to nothing, and we'll just share use of it. That would.
Yeah, it's effectively a yacht club, right? Would be. I mean, you're effectively creating a yacht club.
I love it.
I
love
think
it.
that's the best idea, Dave. Yeah.
I
Right.
think that'd be great. I mean,
Right.
you could
You
have
have
some sailboats down there,
Rochester
too.
Canoe Club that actually has canoes.
You could get everybody to pool some money together and get a place to put sunfish, canoes, and kayaks.
Yeah.
And
Yeah,
then you have
I
so
think
many.
I think they have there's a precedent for that in Victor at Boughton Park, that you can sign up for a permit to get a spot in a rack to put your kayak or canoe.
Oh,
would-
cool.
I would love to see sunfish on the canal with a place to pull them in and out. And if that was Ford Field and somebody said we have this vision of creating an engagement in the canal where people can, bike down there, get in. I mean, imagine biking to Ford Field, hopping in your boat, sailing it up, docking it at El Adams, and then reversing that to go home.
A lot of tacking.
It would be. That's why it'd have to be a sunfish.
It'd have to be a minnow.
Yeah, right. But the idea of creating a location where it's embedded in a document that allows for that type of creativity. If somebody wanted to spearhead the idea and say, hey, look, we got this beautiful Little League park. Why not throw in some sort of facility for boats?
Yeah, great.
And it could be paid for by dues. It could be a separate line item all to itself.
Yeah.
I like the idea. I'm glad you brought up sunfish boats, because sailboats would qualify there.
Yeah. Yeah, I would love to see kayak canoes and sailboats on the canal in the summer.
Yeah, that would be fantastic to see. So a small dock at or tie-ups or something somewhere. You said Bob Ford Field.
I think Ford Field's it's in the village, so we have control, right?
I think it's town.
Ford Field's town.
Is it?
Ford Field is village.
Village.
Who owns it? The village?
No, I believe the Canal Corp owns part, and I think the village owns part. I looked into this once. The Canal Corporation owns a big chunk of it. I had a good chat with the guy that lives next to it, and he's not too happy with things. One of the problems with the Little League field is basically a park. It's all publicly owned land, and it's completely inaccessible to the public. They fenced it off, and it's only designed for Little League use, and they kind of have a monopoly on it. And they started doing some things like they added a concession stand, and they play music and stuff like that during the games. Unfortunately, they aren't necessarily very sensitive to the neighbors that live right next to it. So I don't quite know all the history behind it, but at least one of the neighbors that lives as property right next to it is a little disgruntled about what all they do there, and they would like to see it scaled down so at least he doesn't have to hear it at 7 in the morning on a Saturday. But anyway, I digress.
Policy 11 NA.
Policy 11, anyway. So policy 10, it sounds like we want to follow up on for canoe and kayak and sailboat access. Promote sustainable use of marine resources. I thought this was not applicable.
Yeah.
I hadn't read it in extraordinary detail.
Just a quick comment too. This has to do with the LWRP zone. It's my understanding that Ford Field is part of that zone, is it not?
It's definitely part of that zone.
Sure.
So I live on Boughton Avenue, so Ford Field's at the end of my street, and the LWRP goes along my street. I'm not in the LWRP, but the house across the street from me is.
Okay.
So if they can come up with a type 1 seeker action, I'd have to review my neighbor, but
Sorry, I think 11.2 goes right along with our conversation about the boat tie-ups, small craft launch sites, tie-ups for canoes and kayaks.
Focus.
so let's go down to that. Provide for recreational use of canal fisheries, ADA accessible areas, and boat infrastructure.
Yeah, right, Justin.
Okay, so I guess, like you said, Susan, there's a repeat a bit in here.
Oh, one of many. Yeah.
Okay, so 11.2 is definitely applicable.
Mm-hmm.
Is that the agreement, short-term dockage? Yeah, we do have water and electrical hookups. The sewage pump out station is down near, right next to, I believe, where the, that new barn that they're putting in next to the Auburn Trail.
Yeah, by the village DPW area there.
Over there by the village DPW is where I think the pump out stations are for boats.
That's right.
I don't know if the Pittsford Sewer Department has a pump out station next to the sewer department. That would kind of make sense, but whatever.
And just as a note, it looks like Ford Field's, most of it's in the village, though some parts are in fact in the town.
Okay, so it is close to the boundary, so okay, so
Yeah.
a little bit of it is in the town. Okay.
Yeah.
Let's move on to policy 12, the agricultural lands. I saw this as not a concern.
I agree.
So there's nothing in here that would convert agricultural land and pave it or anything. So I didn't see any concerns with that. Preserve scenic and open space. There's nothing proposed in here that I saw that would impact Powers Farm.
Right.
Okay. So our agreement 12 is not applicable, and 13, which is protecting energy and mineral resources, I also see as not applicable.
Right.
Right.
Okay, and then the next sections are some of the planning areas, and a whole bunch of stuff in these was applicable.
Yeah.
Block 32, that's in the town. If anyone wants to look at that and comment on it, they could. They talk about a boat launch area, existing, there's a small scale boat launch over there at Block 32.
Yep.
So the Canal Corporation property, I think this is the place across from 75 Monroe. Talks about a bunch of stuff in here. Again, that's outside the village. Well, this is a section that may be relevant. We can all read through. We'll just quickly browse through this. That's a section. And again, that's where the bicycle trail like diverts off. And I think they want it to go through here. So this is something to review what the recommendations are in here in more detail if we want to comment on things outside of the village. It does mention this former Monica Oil property.
Yeah. Sure does.
What page are you on?
This is page 5 of section 4.
Got it.
Okay. So then there's the whole village section of planning areas inside here. And there's a whole bunch of them. Nearly all of them are somewhat applicable.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, we can browse through this, but if you guys haven't read them, I would strongly recommend reading through all of this. Let's see, this is the area where that barn is going in, I believe. There is this discussion in here in that 2010 plan about, this is like kind of across the street, across the canal from Talbot's. So they're talking about putting some stuff in there as one possible use. Fortunately, that's all been dedicated parkland, which is fantastic.
Yeah.
Yeah. You look, are you guys on page 5 still?
I'm up to page 9 at the moment.
Oh. All right. I would say just go back, if you could, to the bottom right of page 5. I know this is sort of bigger picture, long-term type stuff, but that little map, it really identifies how we're underutilizing a lot of the canal in and around the village.
Mhm.
And
Well, the canal goes through here, so we see it goes through the village. We have the path alongside it, but things aren't very well connected to it, as we noted. This bridge is, I think, it's almost unusable. The Monroe Avenue Bridge is almost unusable for bicycles.
well, so then herein lies the question. Is a bike or pedestrian bridge as a complement to that bridge an appropriate consideration for the active transportation plan?
Well, if we look at this map, yeah, I mean, that's something to be considered, but my discussion from earlier is Nazareth is like up over here somewhere, and there's been the Auburn Trail is now, and that little new bike trail they had is kind of going right through here to the Auburn Trail. So instead of going over this bridge, if you have access to the canal, you can go over here now, go down that new trail created, connect to the Auburn Trail, and somehow, if it was connected properly, you could get over to Pittsford Plaza or something like that. That seems to be like a nice alternate route.
I don't disagree that it'd be nice to do that and try to connect Nazareth or even the village to a bike path to the Pittsford Wegmans rather than going down Monroe. But I would also focus just a little bit on everybody who lives in the southwest section of the village or of the town and say, you know, how can we create greater density of traffic in and around that bridge area that we've effectively kind of given up on? And would that encourage, I don't know. I just feel like it'd be nice to expand out a little bit the usability of the canal path across the entire village land and or town, and how to do that might be creating a usable infrastructure around that Monroe Ave bridge, which now is an impediment.
Mhm.
And I don't know, maybe a very small parallel pedestrian / bike path would be useful. I know the history of pedestrian bike paths over waterways isn't always perfect, and sometimes it takes years to try to figure it out as to how to best use it. You know, I think about the one over by U of R and the 19th Ward, and they're finally figuring that out, but it took a long time.
That was a big discussion with the comprehensive plan.
No.
Pedestrian bridge. Yep.
Yeah. And maybe that's just because I've given up on the DOT relative to that bridge. I don't know. maybe I shouldn't. So, okay, moving on. Sorry.
Okay. So my wife is wondering how much longer we're going. So I think maybe we just browse through this other section and then we go into this discussion in more detail next week.
I think that'd be good.
Is that all right? So we wrap up relatively soon here?
Yeah.
Yeah, that would be fine. I was wondering too, since we do have a couple of concrete recommendations, when would we be able to forward those over to the trustees so they can start to consider them?
I think if they want, their meeting is what date here? In 2 weeks?
I think that's what Dan said.
Yeah. That's right.
I believe it's the 11th. So if we're meeting on the 3rd and the 10th, that gives us 2 weeks to get them together and forward along to them for them to consider on the 11th.
Yep.
I'll tell you what, I'll type up some of my notes that I have now. And if anyone else wants to type up some of their notes, we can try to merge some of them together. And maybe we can go over, take at least share it next week, and then maybe vote to forward it along on the 10th.
Good plan.
Sounds good.
And I think that's
Try to
okay.
consolidate my notes. I don't have a ton, but I'll try to consolidate some things for the meeting too.
Yep.
Okay. We'll make that a goal then, is to send something out on the 10th.
Yeah, so the goal is to send them something that's a little more concrete than what we just did tonight with some specifics around it, and then wait for their response, and then go through the actual LWRP review.
Right. And think about adding recommendations to the ATP.
Right. So this is a good question, Susan, to that point. Coming up with the concerns is probably a lot easier than coming up with the solutions. And I know they want to get this thing done, and they've sent it over to us for the 60 days that we have to review it. Should we pass it, though, with comment that they're in the midst of considering and possibly working through? They don't immediately have to go to adopt it, do they? They can, or is that meeting already on the agenda with the town? Or on the calendar?
I don't think we know. I think our options are to say, are to vote on it, yay or nay, or to say it's incomplete. But start with sending them comments, and if they don't respond to us, we can just say it's incomplete, although that didn't go so well before. But that's not exactly up to us.
I mean,
But-
as long as they have an addendum that seems to be a living, document that can be added to, I think it should be packed with a lot of these longer term recommendations.
I
Okay.
agree. It's a good idea.
So the
Yeah,
idea would be,
I think our concerns list is not that long, and it's addressable. So if they just had, the town has a planner, for example, they just said, hey, can you just go through these sections and write up some thoughts on how to address it? They can get it done in a day.
right. Yeah.
Or something like that. I mean, we have to
And-
discuss it, but I think that we've had a number of concerns, but basically all we're asking them to do is, hey, consider this and write something up about it.
Right. I mean, I can see how this ATP could, with a strict interpretation of the LWRP, easily be found inconsistent. But I don't really think we want to go there. I mean, I don't want to go there. But I think we can remedy, a lot of its shortcomings, by, like I said, by adding, recommendations to the addendum. So at least we have the opportunity, with the LWRP at our back, to add some vision to the ATEP, and it's nothing more concrete than some of their really weak recommendations, but it would be in a document, and it would be, it's an opportunity to express a wish and to acknowledge the LWRP.
Yeah.
But,
Well, to that
Sounds
point, I
good.
think it doesn't take a couple lines to create some action. And you think about, for example, the goals of the Northwest Quadrant, and quite honestly, how quickly we moved to preserve that green space from what it was, eons ago. I mean, so you get a couple visionary statements. They don't have to be perfectly thought out, but it
Right.
can clearly allow for change in a positive way if we think we can get it in. So I think that's good, and yeah.
All right, well, let's just go through the next few pages. We'll work on some of our comments offline and maybe try to review some of them as a group next week. So next thing here, so we were talking about the western section. We've had a few discussions of that path or not. At least it's parkland now, as you said, which is good. They have a bunch of other discussions on here. I think that since this has all been preserved as park now, that this isn't, this area is not of a huge concern, except in possibly improving access to the canal. But they've already done that. What is this area here?
Where are you, Justin?
I'm on page 8. So this is Monroe Avenue.
You're going backwards.
What page are you on?
Well, we were on, we were on 9.
Yeah, and then Dave asked us to go back to 5.
Okay.
All right. Well, anyway, maybe let's just browse through here a little bit, see what other sections are relevant. So there's the North Main Street and the depot area. There's useful comments in here. I don't know if all of you have read this stuff, but definitely do. This whole village section has a whole bunch of stuff in here.
Yeah, page 16, top to bottom, is packed with good things.
So I'm on 14, you said 16 is a good one. It does talk about getting a path on the south side of the canal somewhere in here. Do you know where that? Anyone know where that is?
Let's see.
Are they talking about the Bob Ford Field area?
Are you talking about from Clover to Monroe?
I'm talking about across from Shane Place, or really after the bridge there. So it'd be across from the parks, the DPW site.
Oh.
Anyway, there's a lot of stuff in here. I hadn't read this most recently enough to remember what they all are or where they are.
Yeah.
Here's the little bridge over the canal they wanted by the library.
No, right?
Oh, here, okay. Here's a couple things inside here. Over here on page 19, section 4. So they show this little bridge over the canal, but they also say this is a big thing. Shane Place Road, and calls for traffic signals at both ends of that. That would be a huge improvement.
Yep.
Yeah. So that's right. Okay.
So one of the things we were talking about is, again, improving those bridges, improving access to the canal. Something we've mentioned a couple times is you can't currently cross State Street, Monroe Avenue, or just about any other main road because traffic is too heavy, because things have been designed for optimized for vehicles, which efficiently gets them through but leaves no gaps in traffic. So you put stoplights in there, and now you can control traffic, and you can create gaps, and you can let pedestrians cross.
Yeah. And take a look at the yellow picture on the page you're on right now. Look at those little slide out boat launches.
Now there you go. That's in there.
Yeah, that's great.
Okay,
I would love to see the public market down in one of those big old barns too.
Yeah,
Open air, closed air, a little bit of
Yeah.
both. Get some refrigeration for some fish vendors.
now Susan, you mentioned parking, and this talks a lot about parking, but you said in a previous meeting, I believe, that coming up with a bigger plan for parking was part of this.
it is. They talk somewhere about a master plan. But it also references an outdated zoning code. So
Was it parking in the ATP or parking in the LWRP?
LWRP, probably ATP, probably too.
Anyway, there's all kinds of suggestions in these sections in the village, and since the ATP committee didn't read it, I'm sure there's a few conflicts. So this talks about parking at Shane Place.
Yeah.
Well, I wouldn't mind if it's so busy that parking's a problem and then people park over in Kings Bend, launch their kayak in,
Yeah.
right? Or park up in the village main and have to walk down. Nothing wrong with that.
Nothing
look,
wrong.
If we're
Yeah.
so popular, I don't need parking spots for people to drive into Shane Place and drive out.
Yep.
Thanks, but no thanks.
Yeah, so parking outside the village so that they can get and use bicycles or launch their boats or whatever would be helpful. So
Yeah.
this is where it talks about boat launches at Ford Field.
Right. Park and paddle.
Park and paddle, great name. I'll put that in my notes. I like that.
Yeah,
Hey,
do you
what-
ever see many
Encourage
people?
Bill to drive to try that. He likes to paddle and pour. How about park and paddle?
Well, look at that. Yeah, you're right. Sorry, I didn't read this enough to know that Ford Field comment was in there, but that is outstanding.
Yeah.
And so then this all goes back to, okay, I get it if they can't go in and amend the ATP in a way to be visionary, but at least make comment to the fact that they continue to support those things that encourage active transportation embedded in the existing LWRP. And we can list those things in particular.
Exactly.
Yeah,
I agree with that.
very well. Yeah.
Or they could do the inverse too, which I don't like as much, which is this plan does not cover items that are already listed in the LWRP, such as, I'd rather have it say we encourage or something like that. So inclusive rather than, yeah, that's right.
Yeah. More is better. More.
For sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, just
More
have one more document that restates exactly what is stated here.
I know. It would look coherent.
Yeah, so here's this one we were talking about. Create a pedestrian-friendly, safe crossing of Monroe Avenue.
Well, hey, how about that?
Yeah.
Yeah, so here's the other one. Here's where I mentioned creation of a trail on the south shore of the canal.
That one would be a little harder because it would have to be eminent domain, right?
I think Renee would donate her space.
I don't think so.
Who
She
did?
put it back there.
Yeah, I think the state owns like 11 feet of the shoreline, so you can put a trail in wherever you want.
Well,
Oh,
then heck,
really?
having a loop would be pretty cool.
It would be great. I hate out and back anythings.
Yeah.
I'm
Well,
loopy.
that's where you got to get Monroe Ave right. I mean, if you could go Monroe Ave to, the one going east. State Street.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, if you could go to Monroe to State and just do a loop on either side, that'd be kind of neat.
Okay, well, this whole thing here, this townwide circulation links, it sounds like we just need to forward this to the whole committee and say, hey, add this to the plan.
Yeah.
Right.
Right. Or specifically state it's no longer an objective in their view, right? Which I don't know if they could do, but
I think the addendum seems, I don't know.
yeah, actually, that's a good point. Let's take that south side canal path, right? And let's say where feasible, create a trail on the south shore of the canal. If the ATP said we don't find that to be a goal or objective, then that's one thing. If they just don't mention it, that's another.
Agreed.
Yeah. So that's
Leave
where
a
I think.
placeholder to consider it, and then it can be amended in the future. And if they say it's not financially viable or at this time, fine.
Correct, or they choose to not go down that path for some different reason, that's fine as well, but it would be nice to have greater comment to the specific line items in the LWRP.
Mhm.
Right.
Yep, and then here's a few more things that are in here that are all things that we just talked about. Canal access points for boats. I'm not sure if there's a lot of room for enhancing streetscapes right now. Support to rent and lease boats in the community. It sounds like also boat storage is what we discussed today.
All
We've
right,
talked about this thing before, kiosks and signage.
Mhm.
feeling very unoriginal now with my ideas.
Well, I think that, good ideas sometimes, there's more than one person that can think of them. But when you don't go look at what people have thought of in the past, which is by not referring to this when they did their plans, they're missing stuff.
Yeah. Well, access is a big one. Boating resources is another. The bridges, trying to figure out what we can do there. And this is all pretty good. Restrooms.
Restrooms, yes.
Well, hey, that's a fair point. Hey, let's step back and think about this. Anybody who's coming in on a bike, walking, hiking, boating, or whatever needs a public restroom.
Yeah.
We don't have one. And the ATP doesn't mention it at all. So
Oh, yeah.
if we're successful in this, we have a failure to provide, I think, a reasonable resource.
And here's a comment I heard from Kevin Beckford once about the topic, is there's been this history of the village going about all this stuff alone, and the village has done all the work on developing Shane Place and all of that. Why doesn't the town invest into some of the things in the core of the village, like the public restrooms? He said they had some fund sitting around of like 200,000 or something like that they could tap into to build a restroom, and they may own some of the land down there. So the village is much more strapped for cash than the town is. The town doesn't want, obviously they don't want to spend any more than they have to on things either. They're pretty miserly, which is good municipal policy in general, but I don't know why they don't help us more. I can't think of too many projects other than Port of Pittsford Park where the town has really done a lot of work in recent years. And there's the new Auburn Trail. That's a new one.
Right.
Trail connection. So they're doing something. So I'm being a little unfair, but
Yep.
in general, it's been, I think, pretty heavy on the village investing in our waterfront, and not as much with the town.
The barn, I don't know if you know this, but the barn may be delayed. The estimate they got on rebuilding it was way more than they thought it was going to be. And so they're putting on the brakes. So I don't know when that barn's going to go up.
Well, it wasn't useful for anything anyway.
right now, but eventually they wanted to use it, I think, you know?
Sorry, bad joke, bad joke.
Oh, sorry.
Maybe,
Okay.
maybe they'll have a use by the time they
By then, yeah.
get the money. Yeah.
I was looking forward to it though. Maybe they could put some restrooms in it.
That would have been fantastic. So,
Yeah.
but anyway, so in these relevant sections in the LWRP, there's all kinds of stuff in section 4 here, going all the way up to page 24 is useful.
Yeah.
So, so basically what we're identifying is section 4. I don't know what the first pages that are useful, but basically up to page 24 is relevant. Pages 23 and 24 had an enormous number of comments.
Yes.
In many respects, it almost looks as though our work is already done. We just have to highlight the sections that are necessary to put into the ATP in some way or another.
Yep.
Our discussion just validated all of this stuff.
Yeah.
Well, we're in agreement with it. So it's, I'm going to highlight one other section I had identified earlier that I found particularly interesting, which is section 3, page 3. So I'll just go back to section 3.
Yep.
Page 1, 2, and 3. And
It's a nifty little water area.
am I in section 3 or 4?
3.
Yeah, page 3, Justin. Uh-huh. Right. The second big paragraph, visually appealing.
Oh yes, this is a big one here.
Yeah.
You see this sentence? This is the massive thing in this. So areas of conflict where vehicles and pedestrians interact, the goal is to upgrade pedestrian side of it greater than and prioritize pedestrians over vehicles. So that's exactly what the deal. I mean, the DOT is always concerned about getting cars through, but right now we can't get pedestrians through because we don't have the infrastructure for it. There's no gaps in traffic. The sidewalks on the bridge aren't, many of the bridges aren't wide enough, and so on.
It's probably too much to think that some kind of a statement like that, because it's in the LWRP, would be binding on a state agency like the DOT, huh?
Yeah.
Be nice.
I mean, I think there's lots of language in here that we got to get some people to actually use this document and encourage the DOT to comply with it to the maximum extent practicable. And it's not our problem if they never read it before the village adopted it. I'm sure it was forwarded to them.
Well, I was just thinking that would be a great sentence to use in our petition.
Mm-hmm.
Good for you. Yeah.
That's just something I saw earlier when I was looking through this. That anyway, there's lots of stuff in here. As Susan said, there's lots of stuff in this document. So a lot of people did some good thinking when they worked on this.
Yeah. Yep.
So do we want to come up with any, if we're working towards getting a document to forward to the trustees and anyone else, do we want to come up with some assignments and some homework or assign some notes for people to write up? I'm just trying to figure out how to get there in a week or two. I could call people individually behind the scenes and we could share documents and work on things, but does anyone want to volunteer for anything? And I guess next question is, what are we going to talk about next week? We've identified a number of areas that are of concern. We've gone over into some detail, but I think our detail is lacking.
Yeah. All right. So then.
Yeah, I feel like I don't have great notes on a lot of this, but I'm happy to put together what I've got and then send it to you after the meeting, Justin, in the next few days.
Yep. Same
Okay.
with me. And at least, you know, page citations and yeah.
Okay.
Well,
Do we want to split?
prioritize? Just to prioritize, I was going to say, do we want to focus on observations and things that we are concerned about without necessarily the recommendations yet? Or do we want to try to get recommendations for language inclusivity within a week or two?
Yeah, I'm kind of struggling to figure out how we're going to get a document together in 2 weeks, and we're still kind of going through it a little bit. We're going through it. We're expressing a lot of great ideas. I'm hearing a lot of things I didn't think of. We're working as a group. I think this is great, but it's slow and time consuming. So with our goal of getting some notes together in 2 weeks, I'm just still trying to figure out how to get there.
Well, here's the benefit. This is why I was trying to break it up earlier in terms of what happens next when we go through this process with and possibly pass the LWRP. The village and the town don't have to sit down right away, right? And we have 60 days. So we can go one of two routes. We can go the route of identifying the concerns, seeing what they have to say, and then offering concrete feedback and recommendations within the 60 days. And just get their opinions first, get them to think about it, see if they have any comments, what their willingness to engage in updating the amendments might be. Because what I don't want to do as a group is go through all these recommendations and have them say, you know, we're just going to go off on our own tangent or do nothing. I don't know if that would be the case. I guess what I'm saying is, can we buy ourselves some time by saying, here's all the things we're concerned about, here's how we would like to go about trying to improve them. Would you like us to take the time within the next 60 days prior to, you know, coming up with those concrete recommendations and providing to them before we do the LWRP, or do we just do it and then send them along recommendations of wording when we pass the LWRP, if we pass it? Everybody, you know.
Well, I think first of all, it's 60 days from when the application is complete. And I think there's open questions we have. If we have open questions that don't understand things, then I think that means the application is not complete yet necessarily. So we can request additional information. So if we want to, however, when we're dealing, we've seen where this goes sometimes. If they disagree with us on that time scale, then they can do some things. But we wondered, first of all, how stormwater systems are being affected. That's a very valid question. They'd have to chew on that for a little bit of time. So there's also things like they've never sent us the appendix of this document, so that's incomplete. I'm sure we could find a few other things, but if we come up with a list of questions and so on, as long as we come up with them within 60 days and we'd say we'd like responses to this, then we've done our initial job of staying within our time requirements. We say it's incomplete until these are resolved, and we're not under the gun. So I know when we did this before with the village board on the zoning code, we told them, hey, we're going to need more time, and they granted it to us, and then they got in a rush at the end and adopted it anyway. But I don't know. I don't know where they would go. I'd like it if they just cooperate and not be in such a rush to go at a manic pace and adopt it before it's ready.
Right.
But we can't control what they do either.
What if we made including our recommendations contingent on our approval?
Yeah.
Well, so let's start with
Great.
getting our documents together and sending it to them. That's step one. What we do with it after that's another matter.
And I'd like to see if we could get this into a form where in all of the areas where we have concerns, we've got a very specific recommendation that they could just, click accept, and then the trustees could say on August 11th, we agree with these 15 suggestions from the planning board, and we're just going to pass it along in the joint meeting verbatim.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that making it easy for them is probably make it more likely to be adopted. I agree.
I agree.
Correct. So, and to that end, though, anything that the village says, yeah, we agree with all this, we're going to go to the joint forum and recommend them verbatim, then that's great. But they can't go to that joint forum, right, for passage unless they've already passed the LWRP. So if we have an LWRP that's passed contingent upon the acceptance of those addendums, I don't know if that would work. Is there a history of that working?
If we conditionally approve it, we can put the conditions on approval, and if they don't meet those conditions of approval, then it's not approved.
Then what would the LWRP for the town do? Would they have to do the exact same thing with the exact same wording?
Anyway, yeah, I think we're speculating a little too much here on tangents and so on. I think our first order of business is to identify the comments to send to them and let them address them. And I completely agree that if we make it as easy as possible for them, that would be that's a great idea.
And can we make it, because again, our jurisdiction's the village, can we say amendments per village and amendments regarding town or larger community, and then the village could go forward and we could approve it conditional upon the village amendments and just offer insight into the town? Because the town may not want to do what we're suggesting that they do, for example, with Kings Bend Park or something different.
Yeah, I don't think we have any say in the town. I think the town planning board could have some say in the town. So, yeah, so, like, we're pleasantly surprised, I think, with the efforts the trustees did with the zoning code. I mean, we identified hundreds of concerns. They agreed with a very high percentage of them. They just implemented it. So
Yeah.
I think a lot of that could probably be the same, particularly if you make it easy for them. I'll be reasonably encouraged that they'll just be willing to make some statements in their addendum that will address concerns, and at least in a passive way to consider this idea, and not to forcibly mandate compliance with something.
Then why don't we tell them this? Why don't we tell them within a week or two, hey, we're going to come up with a list of items that are of particular concern that we'd like to have addressed, and we'd like to get your feedback on. And while not in advance of you reviewing these, we also plan to come up with some specific amendment recommendations, but that won't be complete until a little bit later.
That's a good idea. I think coming up with identifying a list of areas of concern is easier than coming up with the recommendations, as was stated previously.
And then we work on the amendments with a longer time horizon, or a longer amount of time to do it.
Sure.
Okay.
Right? Okay. So then, Justin, I'm just thinking the LWRP is broken up those sections 1 through 13, right? I forget.
Yes.
I think it's 13 of them.
Policies, yeah.
Yeah. 1 was the big one. 9 was pretty big. And anyway, my memory is better than my notes right now. So would it be best for us to just send you the notes of what we have for each of those sections and then compile them, and then we just put a little note saying, and oh, by the way, we'd like your feedback but as an FYI, we're also working on specific amendments to bring forward to the joint session.
I think that would be a good thing to do, but I'm kind of wondering is this is an awful lot of stuff for every person to go through.
Yeah.
But we do a better job at it if we all go through it individually and then discuss it than if we just, I was thinking as to what if we assign one person to take the initial stab at jotting down notes for a particular area.
By number?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So the two big ones were 1 and 9, right?
Yeah, so let me just go through this. I'll just briefly summarize it. One of them, I just noticed that policy 1 we got to review in more detail. Policy 2 was historic preservation, and we had no concern. Policy 3, we were concerned about artificial light sources that might be intrusive, what they're doing with lighting on the bridge. I think that was it. Policy 4 was not applicable. I don't remember what policy 4 was. Policy 5 was protecting and improving water resources, and we had a number of comments on that. So enhancing the canal as an amenity. But I think we've hit on the same thing in multiple sections. So I think our concerns about policy 5 are duplicated in other areas.
Yep.
Policy 6 I had noted was not applicable.
Yep.
We had noticed that for 6 and 7, we both found them not applicable, and we stated that more pedestrian transportation is beneficial to the environment. Policy 8 we said was not applicable. Policy 9 was a significant concern. That was access to the canal. Policy 10, we said item 10.2 was applicable. We talked about boat launches and tie-ups and stuff like that. Policy 11 was similar, 11.2, it said boat tie-ups are needed. And policy 12 we said was not applicable, and policy 13 we said was not applicable. And then in the sections that followed, section 4, we said of the document, we said all kinds of stuff is relevant in there. And section 4 is the region-specific recommendations.
Yep.
And so we said up to page 24 is relevant, and the final 2 pages there, pages 23 and 24, had many ideas for things to address in the future. And I think, completely agreed with all of them that they should be, they're things that we'd already been discussing on our own. So
do you think that we can focus within the next week or two on just 1 through 13, knowing that section 4 and beyond will be more specific to recommendations and specific language? Hey, reference the LWRP, this page, that page, this, and this.
Don't forget that the considerations, the 15 considerations, don't follow the policies. So I think that spending too much time on reviewing the policies with the consistency, when actually we're supposed to be looking at 1 through 15
Criteria.
the
Right.
criteria for the consistency review. So
you're saying the numeration in our code differs from the numeration in that document.
yeah, it's not only enumeration, it's just, so there are 15 factors to consider. There are 13 policies,
Right.
so it's, just keep in mind that this is, these 15 factors are what is supposed to guide us, not, and the policies are the background, that guide our 15 considerations. Yeah.
So the 15 considerations are in the chapter 121.
Mm-hmm.
Chapter 121.
That's the law, the local waterfront consistency law.
Was that in what Linda had sent us?
Here,
Mm,
I will copy and paste it into an email and send it to all of you.
All right, thanks.
And there's one more thing, Justin, you did a great job of listing everything that I had, but I also had a question about the sidewalk surfaces and whether or not they're impervious. And that was, I think, under number 5.
Yeah, we had some more comments. Those things I just spoke of, I just have some brief comments on them. I will just forward them around to everybody, and you can look at them, and if you want to expand anything, you can. I may follow up with people behind the scenes here to see if we can give some more assignments to flesh things out.
Okay. Yeah. I feel like if we just spend some time on 1 and 9 in the ATP.
In the LWR.
Yeah, in the LWRP, and then maybe a little bit with the boating. But I do like the idea, if at all possible, to delay the specific recommendations till a later point and focus more on our immediate concerns and ask the village board for comment and see what they give us back before we start going back at them with recommendations, because maybe just to see what they say, I guess.
Yeah, we'll enumerate our concerns. I can write up some notes from our past meetings and focusing on 1 and 9. I agree with that. So let's drill into 1 and 9 at our next meeting. It's next Monday at 6. Good?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Boy,
Sure.
I'm sorry again for being so late.
No worries.
Oh,
You didn't miss much.
Didn't miss anything.
Yeah.
All right, so Justin, you're sending that to us. That's great.
I was just wondering, instead of going to the whole board with our concerns or questions, I wonder if it would make sense to reach out to Renee or someone first and just ask. Because I just feel like giving them, I would expect that she would support most of the suggestions that we're making. I'm just guessing she may not, but if that's the case, then maybe we can just move directly to the recommendations and say, hey, this is what we came up with. And I don't know, I'd like to circumvent a little bit of formal back and forth if they're just going to get behind the recommendations that we make.
Well, if we have a draft of the document, we could forward it to Renee. So if we try to get some notes together quickly at our next meeting, we can forward it to Renee. And if she wants to comment on anything, then we'll fine tune it the following week and then send it to the trustees.
That sounds good.
Okay.
I think I like the idea of working with Renee because of everybody in the town and village combined, she has the most background on this transportation stuff.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
And Justin, to that point too, I mean, if we just let them know, I was trying to save some time in terms of the work in the short period. If we were to say something to the effect of, and recommendations to follow, then they don't have to necessarily do the work to determine what that would be. Right? So then we can worry about our language for the amendment later, and we can just let them know this is what we're going to be addressing. Can you offer comment if it would be inappropriate for us to go down this road or likely not supported?
I mean, I'm really kind of for wrapping this up, but what do you want comments for back from the board?
So my idea is there anything that we're going to suggest that they're just going to actively not consider or I don't know, I guess.
I think they would have to see the recommendations.
Okay.
Before,
Yeah, maybe we just say these are our current thoughts and we're going to be working on recommendations.
Yeah.
And just leave it at that. And
yeah.
That way they have enough information to know what we're going to be working on. They know we're working on it. 2 weeks from now, they can talk about it if they want to, but it won't be anything concrete.
Right.
And it buys us a little time to do the exact wording for the recommendations.
Right.
Okay.
All right, I'm going to send around a brief summary of things we discussed today. It's not fleshed out in a whole lot of detail, but that's okay. It just kind of summarizes things. Couple sentences, and we can talk in more detail at it next week. So policy 1 and 9 is next week. Again, 6 p.m. Is everyone good with that?
Yep.
Are we good for meeting the next 2 Mondays?
Yep,
Sure.
not going anywhere.
You are somewhere.
I
Hey,
am. I'm a lucky girl.
Oh, and you guys probably know this, but New York State used the village of Pittsford, a picture of the canal, Shane Place, on their cover of the LWRP design PDF.
I think it's also front and center in JFK Airport, I believe, too.
Yeah,
That's cool.
Yeah, someone commented on that previously.
yeah.
Tom Cummings saw it when he went through the airport.
Yeah, that's right. He did. That's who it was.
Yeah,
All
I
right.
didn't remember who it was. I remember someone's commenting on that.
Mhm. Yeah, it's the introduction to the comprehensive plan.
Right.
Okay.
All right, well, I think we're done for tonight. We've had a very long discussion, longer than our previous meetings, but this is good. I feel like we're making headway here. With that said, we'll schedule meetings the next 2 Mondays at 6 p.m. Try to get our documents together. I may contact you guys behind the scenes. I just sent out 2 emails. Oh, I guess I was working on my email with my screen being shared, didn't I? I guess I can stop sharing my screen. I don't know if you guys stopped looking at it long ago.
I can't read it, so I'm looking at it, but can't read it.
Motion to adjourn?
Seconded.
All
Aye.
right.
Aye.
Hey,
Good, everybody.
show everyone voted to adjourn.
Yep.
Thank you, everybody. We'll see you
Thank
next
you.
week. Bye.
Yep.